happy to be here? All right, the rest of you will work on it. What's in your heart this morning? For some of you it's pretty easy. A bit of cholesterol, a bit of arrhythmia, tachycardia, palpitations. For the other 10% of you, sorry, I checked the medical records before we came. What is in your heart today? For some of you might be a little bit anxious about what to prepare for lunch. There might be other things you have to address today that are causing you some weight within your heart. And for further others of you, there may be much heavier things weighing upon you today. Some heavy burdens to bear, some heavy things that are really constricting and affecting your heart. We're going to sing in the first song about what is in our heart. The big challenge in Christianity is that it's often said, and it's a bit of a cliche, the world tells lies, Christians sing them. Sometimes when we sing songs, if we actually looked at the words, it's like, I don't think I actually believe that. I don't actually think that's true. But the important thing is that this first song, if this is true for you, then sing it in your heart of hearts. If it's not quite true for you, but you'd like it to be true for you, then sing it into reality. It's the same as playing scales on a piano. You start doing it, it doesn't make any sense, but you keep doing it until it becomes part of who you are. So I invite you all to stand while we sing this wonderful song. There's a song that's ringing in my heart today. Please give it full voice. We'll sing the first verse. Out, I think. Have we got a defibrillator in the house? Oh, it's right here. Wonderful. Do you know how to use it, mate? Okay, in this next one, you turn around, you watch everybody else and figure out who's maybe going to need that to be warmed up. Okay, good job. Fantastic. Thanks. All right, verses 2 and 3.
This morning from Matthew 11:25-30. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you are pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
G'day. When I grow up, I hope I've got a jacket as long and majestic as Kerry's was last night. But for now, this is where I'm at. All I've ever wanted to be in my life is a farmer. Absolutely all. From when I was very, very young, this took over my heart. We had friends, relatives, Dad's cousin, had a 330-acre farm southwest of Kingaroy, some beautiful red soil country, and I was introduced to that at a very, very young age, and it took over me. I would be so excited every time we'd be heading there on holidays. I'd sit in the back seat, always try to position myself in the middle. I'd have a notebook and a calculator, and I would watch and I'd ask Dad for odometer readings as we went, because I knew the time that we left, and I'd calculate how far we'd went, what our average speed was, approximately what time we'd be arriving on that basis, and I would do these little calculations in my notebook. And you'd drive along, and eventually you'd reach a certain point where you'd crest this hill, and it'd be the first sighting you'd have of the farm house and the sheds and the trees around it. And my heart would just about explode, and those last kilometre would just about kill me. And we'd finally arrive there. I'd jump out of the car, I'd run around, I'd check the machinery shed, because that'd give me some idea of what's actually going on now. I'd see in the paddocks where things were up to. Then I'd go inside and ask 1,000 questions to find out, like, what are we going to be doing? What's happening? And I would, from the very, very young age, I'd wake up spontaneously a bit after 5 o'clock, and I'd go out with my cousin Stan to go out and feed the pigs. We'd hand mix the grain in the grain shed, and we'd load it in some bags, put it on the old ute, and head across to the first piggery. And it was great. He was always worried about me as a city kid. I had these, pull-on boots kind of like this, but he didn't want them to get messed up. So he'd always tell me to make sure I literally walked in his footsteps so that he would remove the dew as I walked behind him. And he had these incredibly bowed legs. And I just thought as a kid, I thought, man, those water drums must be seriously heavy. Like I honestly thought he was just bent because of how heavy the drums were. And so we'd go across and feed the first round of pigs. Then we'd head up to the second piggery. And it was my job. I was so excited about it. I would flush out the pig poo channel at the back of the shed. So my cousin was inside, and he's sweeping out, moving out, and pushing out these drain holes. And there's this channel along the back. But during the day before, the sun had hit the kind of the poo that had come out and kind of crusted over a bit and stuff. So I had to get the water running, and I had this broom and shovel, and I'd kind of break the crust on the way through. If you ever need to do this, just take some notes. Break the crust all the way through, then the water would start to run through the channel and kind of soften it up a bit. And I'd go row after row with this broom and push it through, and eventually this massive mound of molten, mushy manure would find its way down to the pig poo pit at the end. And that's a lot of alliteration. But that was exciting for me. That was my job. And it would be pristine by the end. We finished that. We'd go back in. We'd have breakfast, which was just fantastic. And I'd be busting to get back out. I'd reluctantly come back in for lunch after we'd done all sorts of different things around the farm. Reluctantly come in and have a bit of afternoon tea. And at the end of the day, we'd do the rounds with the animals again. And then we'd head back towards the farmhouse. The last light of the western sun behind us in the distance, down the waterway, moving towards the farmhouse. The first thing you'd hear would be my cousin Betty's really loud voice laughing in the house. You'd hear the fun and laughter of the family being there. Then you'd catch the smell of the wood stove as you got closer with the tea cooking. Head to the back and then just wash up a bit and go inside. And as a little tacker, that's a pretty long day, and I'd sit down and watch a bit of the news, and my great uncle, he was just about stone deaf, so the TV was up at like 6,000 decibels, screaming away there, but sitting watching the news, and I'd frequently just fall asleep on the couch before tea was even served. I was just wrecked, but I couldn't wait to do it the next day and the next day. I wept every single time I left that place. And even to the last time I ever left it when I was 21, because the farm had to get sold, I just wept every time. There was something that just took over my heart about this place. It was so deep within me. And even after it was sold and went out of the family, years down the track, I put, a property search on Manium in realestate.com, so if there's any chance it might come up for sale again. I even found the guy who bought it and made contact, said, look, if you're ever looking to sell, make sure you contact me. I was earning like 25 grand a year at the time. And he called me one day and said, just letting you know. So, look, no, I'm not quite in a position to buy it at the moment. It's like, yeah, right. Had no possible chance. So this thing just possessed me. When I was at school, in the breaks between holidays, I would write about it. I would be either preparing to go there, or I would be, writing about my stories there. Like, what is that? What is that gets into a person, that possesses them so deeply from such a young age? There's some kind of drive. There's some kind of a desire. There's some reaching out for something that is so strong. Every one of us has an intrinsic motivation, a drive that is put into us by God. Unfortunately, we know very little about this, and one of the main reasons for this is that theologically, we haven't even been aware of it. Simon, who does our social media stuff, his dad spent 12 years researching what this thing is, this energy of God that's in the New Testament. It's in the New Testament 34 times, but no theologian in 2,000 years had seriously addressed this topic. And so Simon's dad spent 12 years on it, 900-page, 3-part theological text to try to explore this thing. It's different to giftedness. It's an actual drive. It's an awareness of something about the kingdom that you're driving for, and it's unique to each of us. There's a piece of the kingdom that each of us has burning within us. It's a drive that's there. And so for me, it's a kind of my specific one is a kind of a reaching for fulfillment and wholeness, like a wanting to put the world together properly with all its bits. Everything I do, and that was born in the farm days, and then right through time, everything I've done points to this same approach, obsessively trying to put things together as well as they can. Currently at the moment, it's building a house for mum and dad and putting each piece together as beautifully and correctly as it can be done. And that's a piece of the kingdom. For some of you, it might be the drive for justice, that things would be put right, there'd be justice in relationships, people would be treated the right way, that there would be love expressed. For some of you, it may be that the desire is that people would be close to each other in relationship. You just hunger after a closeness where people are inspiring each other in intimate, close relationships in community. For others, it's that things would be done right and effectively and would be kind of sustainable and efficient. And that's a drive within God's kingdom. For others, there is a drive that people's gifts would be identified and be able to work together in harmony in different ways, and this pulsates within you. And for still others, there's the desire that things would be renewed, people would be renewed, there'd be healing, there'd be restoration that would take place. Now, sadly, because we haven't even been aware that it's a thing in the Bible, plus the fact that so many times in life, and many of you will have had this, that you've been conformed and pushed into a mode of stuff that you're meant to do, or the way we do things in church life, or the way we do things in the Salvation Army, and that's kind of squeezed and boxed that and pushed aside this God-given drive that God has placed there within you. But for others as well, you have a difficult relationship with this drive because you've got this thing within you that wants to make something happen. But so often it might be met with disappointment and frustration, and so you end up with a bad relationship with it. It's almost like I don't want to acknowledge that drive I have within me because it just so often leads to this pain within my life. But nevertheless, it's there, and it's not really the main part of my topic today, but I would love over time to help everyone here to discover what that thing is within yourself that drives you forward, that piece of the kingdom of God that God has placed there and said, yeah, Stephen, I want you to find that. I want you to help bring that part of my kingdom about and move your energies towards that thing. So the challenge is, if you've got this thing, and as a little kid it was like this rocket booster got attached to me and it just drove me like crazy and was going to continue to drive me right through life. Well, if you've got a rocket and God's kind of given you this motivation within you, you need to work out how to harness it. You need to actually be able to steer it somewhere. You need to be able to navigate, because if you've got a drive, it's either going to do great things or it's going to be a disaster. It's just going to crash and burn. And basically, that's what sin is. A God-given drive within you that gets misdirected and pointed in the wrong direction. You end up in all sorts of terrible places. So when it comes to harnessing and steering things, biblically speaking, the yoke is one of the really critical tools. The Bible talks quite a lot about yokes, and sometimes in oppressive terms. So you get things like, people suffering under the yoke of a particular king, or people even suffering under the yoke of sin. And so what a yoke is, if you picture it, like two big, buffaloes kind of thing, with a big wooden thing over their shoulders, side by side, tying them together. A yoke, in a general sense, is something that sets an expectation. It sort of steers, it says, this is the way that you're going to be going. And so when Jesus said to the followers at the time, he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden." He was fully acknowledging, not trying to minimize the burden and difficulties we face in life, but fully acknowledging them, saying, man, you've got a heavy load. So Jesus comes to every one of you and says, wow, that's quite a thing you're having to pull there. You've got a wagon and it's got your family in it, it's got your job, it's got pressures you've got from other people, it's got that conflict you're dealing with at the moment. That's a lot of stuff. And so he says to me, Adam, yeah, you've got some things there. You've got some grandkids, you've got a family, you're building a house, trying to help your wife with a nursery, you've got a ministry, different stuff. It's like, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot of stuff. And I acknowledge that. And I know that within that, you're driven to do that. You want to do those things, but boy, that's a serious load. And so he says, come to me, all of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. It's like, okay, I'm listening. This sounds good. I'm still listening. And he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And the next part's interesting, because I am gentle and humble of heart and will give rest to your soul. So I am gentle and humble in heart. I'm not going to put a silly load on you. I'm here in human form. I know that life as a human being is really difficult, and the burdens you have to carry can be very, very heavy. So I am humbly recognizing the challenges that you face in your life, and I want to come alongside you and help you with that, if you're willing to take my yoke upon you. Now that points to an important part. Different to a tyrannical king who puts the yoke on you and bolts it on top and bottom and you can't get out of it. Jesus just kindly says, take it upon you, which implies you can take it off if you want. But by all means, lower that over your shoulders, take it on you, and I'm right next to you in that yoke. And I will help carry that load. And then he says in the end, because the load I'll put on you is light. The burden is not heavy. I will put a light load on you. So here's the seeming paradox, because I recognize you've got these incredible challenge. You've got a huge cart you've got to pull in life, but the load I'll put on you is light. And that's the magic of a yoke, because the point of a yoke is that if you've got one big beefy buffalo, that's Jesus, and one kind of bit weaselly one with one crooked leg and whatever else, that's us, and you get yoked with that, then the point is Jesus is saying, I want you to carry load, because part of the dignity of being a human being is that you carry a load. You contribute to the transformation of my world by carrying some load with you. But I am here to take up the slack. I'm here to carry the load with you, to lean into that, to make sure that by the way of true life, you eventually get, you and your family and everyone tracking with you, makes it to life in all its fullness. And so that is the carriage that Jesus brings to us, and the desire for him to just come alongside. We have, as I mentioned before, this word for the Holy Spirit, the paraclete, the one who comes alongside. A genuinely spiritual person is one who comes alongside others. It's a yoke-like position and says, like, let's do this together. Let's walk this road together. And so you have the power and you have the steerage in that process of carrying a yoke. And that's important because we struggle with yokes. And the tendencies will go basically one of three ways. We'll want to pull ahead further and harder. We'll want to go at a pace that is not appropriate. Or we want to fight when someone reacts to us. We want to push back on someone. And Jesus is sort of, whoa, trigger. Hang on there. Let's just back off a little bit. That's not right, because you're going to do yourself damage, and the people in your cart, they're going to get damaged. Everyone's going to lose at this. So just back off, buddy. Hey, just slow down. And then the sort of flight mechanism is, the cats, when you go to drag a cat to the bath, it's like, and they kind of backpedaling, trying to get away from the bath. So the tendency is to pull back on the yoke. And Jesus is saying, come on. You need to speak into this situation. You need to take that bold step. You need to move forward a little bit more. You're dragging back here. You need to step into this and lean into the yoke further. And the other one, of course, is that you simply detach it and you pull off to a sidetrack, which is simply wrongdoing. It's just saying, I don't want to go the direction that Jesus would want me to go. I'm just going to do the wrong thing. I'm going to head off on a goat track here, head off down the mountain and crash out on the side. So we wrestle with each of those directions, and right through my life, as I've tried to harness these drives that are within me, I've ended up doing all three of those things at different times, trying to surge ahead, go a bit manic. And anyone who's ever worked with me knows I can get a bit manic and go a bit hard with things and pulling ahead at a pace that's just not sustainable. And at other points in time, I've hung back and not engaged, sometimes in conflicts or speaking into situations where difficult words need to be said. And I'm hanging back in that yoke, and he's saying, come on, boy, talk, speak up. You got to deal with this. And of course, other times where I've simply gone off to the side in a completely wrong track, nowhere near where Jesus wants me to go. So that's what it looks like in the yoke from that perspective. But lastly, I just want to bring another perspective to it. And that is that when Jesus talked about the anxiousness of our lives and the difficulties and things that we face, in the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking about worrying about what we'll eat or drink and all these kinds of challenges of life and the anxieties we might have. And he talks about, see how the lilies of the field grow. They don't toil or spin. And yet even Solomon, in all of his glory, was not clothed as beautifully as they are. And so what we have is a life of toiling and spinning, which is basically every version of fighting the yoke or tearing out of the yoke. So you're not matching the tempo and rhythm and embracing and enjoying walking with Jesus along the way, but you're wrestling and fighting against it. You're kind of getting really tetchy on your journey. And what he says is, on the one side, you've got toiling and spinning, just trying to make stuff happen or avoiding things. On the other side, you've got beauty. And so these are actually kind of the opposite poles of this. So a life walked in the yoke genuinely with Jesus is a beautiful life. If I elaborate that a bit further, a life walked with Jesus in the yoke is an attractive life. Others will look to that life and be attracted to that life. If you're fighting and wrestling the yoke with Jesus, you are leading an unattractive life. It's ugly. Now, I don't mean a life, we're not talking about physical beauty or superficiality or things that we own or nice things that we have. We're talking about the way you approach the situations of life. Is it done with beauty, no matter what the challenges are? Now, Jesus set the benchmark on this. If you think about, if I be lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men unto me. So what he's pointing to is, if I get lifted up on a most hideous, ugly-looking torture device imaginable, being mocked and scorned and spat at and whipped and bruised and bloody all over the place, this picture of absolute ugliness, I will turn that into the most beautiful thing imaginable, and people will irresistibly be drawn towards that. So the thing in and of itself is very, very ugly. But the way in which he approached it, the way he was yoked with his Father, meant that he was able to make this into something beautiful, something deeply attractive to people. So the question for all of us out of this is your walk with God beautiful or repulsive?
That's a strong, strong word, but just technically it means that it repels, it pushes things away, pushes people away. As our children, my children have had to watch me walk the road at different times, and my approach to challenges has been repulsive to them. Not that they've used that word, but you can tell the dynamics that are playing out from that, because I'm not yoked with Jesus in that moment. I'm either pushing ahead, I'm dragging behind, or I'm pulling off to the side. And one way or another, it's ugly. And so if you take the ugly circumstances, some of you may be facing some really ugly circumstances, some people acting in a very ugly way towards you, doing ugly things to you or your family or things in the workplace. But in the way that you are yoked with Jesus, are you turning that into a spectacle of beauty, something that people can look at and say, wow, I'm drawn to that, because hats off, that's an amazing thing of beauty that you've taken from something that was otherwise very ugly. And who would like this place to be busting at the seams with people celebrating and praising God? Yeah? Wonderful. So, my whole work is in church development, and it's really not rocket science, because for a whole church to be attractive and beautiful and draw people towards it is simply a matter of the people within it walking in a yoked way with Jesus, such that their life looks beautiful, that they're not seeing toiling and spinning and wrestling, because we are declaring that we are in allegiance with the most beautiful being ever, the most beautiful, magnificent, powerful human being ever. And so if we're pulling ahead of the yoke with that person, that just looks ugly. It's just weird. If we are dragging behind and not going with that person, it doesn't make any sense. If we are pulling away from that person, it doesn't make any sense. In the Old Testament, in the commandments, we read, do not take the Lord's name in vain. It's very unfortunate that that's been reduced down to, oh, don't use God or Jesus as an expletive in a sentence. It's like, yes, don't do that. It's not nice. Like, don't do that at all. But don't take the Lord's name in vain, taken to a more serious level, is don't speak as if you are yoked with Jesus when you're trying to get out of the yoke, when you're trying to pull ahead of it, pull behind it, when you're not actually paying attention to what's happening. One of the disciplines for me in recent times has been, as I feel anxious and I either want to push ahead or pull back or rip and tear around in the yoke, there's a situation in front of me and it feels ugly to me. And I literally do this. I sometimes even say it out loud to Jesus next to me, saying, did you know about this? And of course, every time the answer is, yes, I knew about this. But for me to ask the question, it's like, oh, good, okay. That's a reminder for me to just stay in, lock in the pace, and just keep moving forward. Because he can take up the slack, he can pull me back if I'm paying attention and choosing to be tied with him in that way. So I ask you this fairly strong question. In what ways right now in your life is your walk yoked with Jesus beautiful and attractive to the people around you? And in what ways is it a bit repulsive and ugly? And I ask you to bring those things to God. So please just reflect on that now. Jesus, we want to share a yoke with you. You invite us to join you side by side. You promise to never leave us to the very end of the age. And especially when we both know that the load being pulled is especially heavy and the challenge is difficult. Especially that time, we want to know the rest for our soul, the peace that can come to us if we find the right balance, if we move in that very situation at the speed that you're saying, in the direction that you're saying, and taking notice that if we are not leaning in enough or leaning in too hard, that we're not acknowledging what you are offering us by your power and your strength and guidance in that moment. Help us to become more sensitive in each moment, especially in the challenging ones. And picture you right beside us, to be aware of your presence with us, that we would practice your presence in everything that we do and understand better and better the kind of relationship, the partnership that you want to have with us in all things. We love you, Jesus, and we are so thankful that despite your immense power and capability, you want to give us the dignity of becoming truly human, growing into the fullness of being humans, experiencing your wondrous creation, transforming your wondrous creation, farming farms, farming our lives, nurturing the people around us, and living lives that are attractive to you, but certainly attracted to others around, who would say, there's something happening in that person's life. I can see the circumstances they're facing, but there is profound beauty in the way they are facing those circumstances. We pray all this in your name, for your kingdom's sake. Amen. Our closing song. Beth, would you bring up the first verse, please? Lord, I come before your throne of grace. I find rest in your presence and fullness of joy. Pray that will become more and more real for us today, tomorrow, the coming week, and that we will encourage each other along the way. Perhaps you'll even ask each other, are you yoking? It may be useful. I don't know if it'll catch on, but it's worth a try. If you see someone with a furrowed brow and really struggling, just ask them, are you yoking? And hopefully they'll get the picture. Would you please stand as we sing verses 1 and 2 of this song, please.
Face
pray blessing on you all this week, that you will find the path, whether it's challenging or whether it's easy, that you will find it a path that you are sharing with Jesus, that you are aware of his presence with you, and that you will gradually see the destination that he's drawing you towards, that all through your entire life he has been energizing and driving you to bring about and to bring into your own life and to the rest of the world. I pray that will become clearer and clearer to you.